board. My name is Jez Clark. I'm CEO and co-founder of Eden Smith Group. This Leaders Advisory Board has been brought to you by Jane Smith, who is on the call, our lovely head of executive search. She's probably been in touch with all of you. And Krista Swain's on the call, our marketing director from Eden Smith Group as well. And I believe I just saw Lisa Rabone, who is our Chief Data Advisor and Head of Sustainability for Eden Smith Group. So welcome to the meeting. Topic around integrating Gen AI. And we've got two fantastic speakers for you today. So I really do appreciate that you've come on to do this with us. We've got Sarah Schlobum, Head of AI over at Citation Group, who provide compliance services including HR, health and safety and cybersecurity, previously Head of AI for Kubrick Group, and also worked for the likes of HSBC. And she's going to be talking about generating ethical outcomes. And we have Itoro Liney as well, specialist in data science and AI ethics, technology manager for Just Eat, and previously data science and analytics manager for the Principality Building Society. Insight modelling analyst for Legal in General before that, I believe, or some time ago. And you're going to be speaking about artificial intelligence ethics. So I'm really excited about this. This will be the first of quarterly, so we'll run 4 of these, very topical for this year, and we're really hopeful that you'll join us for the future ones. Also, there's opportunity to ask questions at the end, which I believe Jane will facilitate for us. So really keen to get your feedback after this. If you can come back to us and let us know what was good, what wasn't, what we can do better for the future ones. But yeah, that's me. Thank you very much for joining, and I believe we are going straight to you, Sarah. So yeah, welcome on board. Thanks for doing this, and look forward to listening.
Thank you. All right, so I will go ahead and share my screen. We tested that a minute ago. That worked roughly. Sorry, no, it's not working at the minute. Give me just a second.
Always the way, isn't it?
Yeah, just tested it and it worked.
Sorry, this is my facetious chip in. You should just use AI.
I promise you it worked a minute ago, but give me just a second and we will hack it as we do. Okay. There we go. How about that?
Perfect.
Put that into slideshow mode. Hopefully you can't see the other million tabs I have open. So, hello, you may notice a theme in the slides. I will explain about that when we get there, but obviously these have been sort of AI generated as we go. Hello, that was a great introduction. I don't need to give my CV history. I'm Sarah Schlobum and I'm head of AI. I love talking about AI ethics. I think it's something that you need to think about at the start of absolutely every project. And I think there's sort of 4 main areas that that I sort of want to focus on as we think about what we're doing and how we can use AI. Obviously, this has been a year for it, right? I don't think I've talked about anything since ChatGPT dropped November 30th, 2022. And everybody's using it, but are they using it safely? Well, in a business, I think an important thing to think about is everybody is going to be using it, right? When it first came out, sort of the things we were thinking about was, okay, there were 2 knee-jerk reactions. One was sort of, well, can we just not tell anybody? And I think the cat's out of the bag. I don't think we're getting away with that one anymore. And the other one was, well, can we just block it? Can we just, use IT to completely block ChatGPT from all the browsers? Well, that's, you can, but people are just going to use it on a second device, on their phones, or just going to email it to themselves. They're gonna do something with that. And you shouldn't like completely limit yourself from using a new technology because it has a lot of benefits and it can make people a lot more productive. For example, technical teams using it in coding are finding something like people are quoting roughly 10 to 30% of productivity increases when they're using something like GitHub Copilot. So what can you do? Well, you can have a good AI policy. Again, generated by AI, it's not perfect yet, so it's still an AI poly and governance. But these slides were cracking me up when I first saw them, so I decided to run with it. So I think you need to have like a really pragmatic AI policy. If you're using something like free ChatGPT, for example, as the saying goes, if it's free, you're the product. So if you're just using the free one on a web browser with 3.5, it is taking your data and learning from that. So never put sensitive information in that, never put confidential information in that. If you're working with client data, never put PII, things like that. But if you wanted to do something like, rephrase this email to make it sound less passive aggressive, write me a poem about budgeting, then by all means, go ahead. If you're using it for something more robust, like, are you going to use it to deal with your code? Well, you probably want to make sure that you can take care of that as well. That doesn't mean you can't use it, again, behind certain systems. If you're using it within one of the managed cloud providers, if you're using it within like enterprise GPT, if you've paid for it on your own, if you're using ChatGPT Plus, you can switch it to say, don't share my data with others, by the way, but that's an active step that you have to take. So I strongly recommend, as you're thinking about your business, come up with an AI policy, but make sure that it covers a wide range of use cases. And ours at Citation is really pragmatic in the sense, if you want to write better emails, fill your boots. If you want to do something much more complex that might be touching other systems, that could be touching important infrastructure, then come have a chat with us first. So I think that's the big one. Think about the governance, think about having a policy. And if you don't have one in the meantime, don't put sensitive data in there. Yeah, so that's a huge one. So what does that mean? You could get GDPR fines. You could get, you could leak sensitive information. There have been a couple of really public use cases of that. But again, you can't pretend it doesn't exist. You can't pretend that people aren't going to use it. You have to, just like you would with any risk, you need to manage it, and you need to put the systems in place in your business so that people know sort of what the guide rails are, how you can use it, when you can use it safely. And there are options. That doesn't mean don't use it. If you're using Microsoft for all your Office products, for example, if you use Bing Chat, it specifically says your data is protected in most use cases. So think about those ways that you can to use it safely, and how to communicate that with everyone in your organization. Next thing I want to think about is to treat your AI as a first draft, or indeed a first draft. So AI, I think one of the best ways to think about, as you adopt it, as you start using it, it's for the most part, generative AI, like, it's amazing what it can do. But if you think of it as like a really sort of kind of stupid assistant or like a really untrained intern or something like that, somebody that you can say sort of, go do this task for me, but you're going to really need to thoroughly review the output on that. So that works when you're talking about it in terms of content. You need to make sure that it's not brought back something copyrighted. You need to make sure that it's not saying complete nonsense, because one of the things that it does is it does this thing called hallucination, where it just sort of very confidently gives you a wrong answer. It could be completely nonsense and you can tell it that it's wrong, but it will be confidently wrong, like some folks we may have met at dinner parties across the way. So review everything carefully, and right now keep a human in the loop. The same thing works on a technical side. So if you've got coding teams, if they're using something like a GitHub Copilot, or whichever system you're using out there, if you're doing something really small that's really common, it's probably going to give you a really correct answer. If you're using something that's much more complex, if you're not in a managed system where you can safely let it look at the rest of your database, it might give you a crazy answer. Sometimes it will give you a very logical answer that isn't how humans actually designed the software. So it will say, oh, it should look like this. And you're like, yeah, it should, but that's not actually how that programming language works. So before you push, before you publish, make sure there's a human in the loop and that you treat these as first drafts. But that's great, right? It's so much easier to edit than it is to create. And you can use it for first drafts of all kinds of things. You do get some entertaining responses, and you can always ask it to summarize. You can always ask it to write you a poem about it at the end in iambic pentameter, if that's the sort of thing that would liven up your board presentation. But yeah, just don't trust it. Don't fully automate it for a lot of processes yet. It is getting better. And even this slide, which of course is auto-generated, is so much better than what would have come out even 6 months ago. Because I tried to do a similar talk about 6 months ago, and it was interesting, but not as good for these. I think so. This one, this one is thinking about the sort of bias that we're gonna address in AI, and I know that Ettore is going to talk about this in a little bit more depth as well, but humans have bias. We do, it's built into us. We try to overcome it, but that's sort of what we're inbuilt with. We have this pattern recognition. And so when the machine is being trained on data generated by humans, it's going to pick up those biases, and in many cases, you can going to amplify it as it learned. So it's getting better about this. You can tell that the prompts have, they've been trying to tweak this. But still, even in this slide deck, which has been generated by Dolly, there's something in common with all of the people presenting or at the head of the table. So it's a problem in all of machine learning. It's a problem in all of AI. How do you address it? Well, being aware of it is part of the problem. There are a variety of metrics, there are a variety of different things that people have used to try and sort of point at it and say, oh, well, if you put in this outcome, you put in that outcome, you can try to track that. Personally, I found one of the very best things you can do is make sure that you've got a diverse group of people in the room, building the data, being involved in the process. As stakeholders, as designers, as developers, as people are going to say, hang on a minute, is that going to work for me? If I'm designing a voice system, I'm going to realize that, like, hey, actually, maybe it's not as good with voices with higher pitches. If it's only been trained on lower pitched male voices, it's not going to be as good as picking up higher pitched female voices, which is true for a lot of things like Alexa. I'm going to notice that, well, I've got an accent. I've got an American accent, so it's going to do okay, but is it going to be okay with a Glaswegian accent? Maybe not, but then again, I'm not always. So I think the more you can sort of think about making sure that you've got people in the room who know how this is going to affect them, the better product you're going to have at the end. Because at the end of the day, if you're marketing a product, it's almost certainly for everyone, not just one subset of people. This isn't just my recommendation. This is the kind of thing that's recommended by the Alan Turing Institute, for example, which is the UK's body on machine learning and artificial intelligence. So yes, the importance of diversity in teams is to address AI bias. It's getting better at the words. It's at least you can tell what the words ought to be now. I don't have the new Microsoft Copilot, which has now been launched to everyone, so I can't quite. This is just relying on GPT-4 at the minute. So yeah, those are the sort of 4 big areas that I think that we need to think about when trying to use AI in business. We can't pretend that it's not happening, but we can treat it like any other risk that's coming our way and think about the things that we need to do to deal with it safely, to make sure that we're using the right controls and we have the right governance around it. And until you do, don't put in sensitive information, don't put in anything you wouldn't want to see on the front page of the Daily Mail. Treat it as a first draft for your content or code. Think before you push or publish. It's, don't just trust those results. Right now, the best things that we're finding are that we're making humans more efficient and better and faster. We're not completely eliminating jobs, which I think should be good news for quite a lot of this, unless your job is trying to cut costs in terms of headcount, in which case, well, you can at least make people go faster. And then bias will creep in. One of the very best things you can do is to make sure that you have a lot of different people looking at it, a lot of different people on the team who can think about how to address it. And yeah, this is absolutely the first draft. All of these slides, I put in these key takeaways just to see what slides it would give me, and asked for a summary and asked for a title slide. And I was so entertained by the results, I decided that I needed to keep them as is.
It's actually really effective because it just demonstrates the need for proofreading, and
Yeah.
it's just not quite there. 'Cause it's like, how could it not spell? That's not even thinking. That's just, yeah.
But that's all it's doing, right? So it was actually my boss gave this analogy, right? Imagine you're like locked in a room, right? And somebody hands you like a Chinese character. I'm assuming nobody on the call speaks Chinese. I certainly do not. They hand you a Chinese character, right? And you have to put it in some other part of the room to get output, right? You could eventually, if you had feedback, learn which order that those characters go in to get the correct response from the other person. That doesn't mean you suddenly speak Chinese.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Really interesting.
Yeah, really good. Especially around kind of the bias piece as well, and just having that diverse team, you know, around you. Because I think that's obviously hugely important, you know, moving forward. So no, it's really interesting, Sarah. Thank you. Lots to take away there.
In your opinion, Sarah, if you looked at a percentage of businesses using ChatGPT, whether it's paid for or not, are you thinking like there's so many companies just going out there and utilizing it to do as much as possible without having this lens on it?
Yeah.
And what's the main impact of that?
I mean, I think in most places people are going to get away with it, which is why it's one of these sort of it's one of these risks that catches you unaware, right? Because most of the time, if I put in an email to a client, yeah, that's probably fine, right? Until something leaks, until there have been a couple of really public use cases where people have pulled in other companies' documents, or it goes to train a model with some sensitive information, or yeah, suddenly you're in a nightmare with a GDPR request, that kind of thing. And the thing is, it's really easy to deal with. If you're already paying for GPT-4, just go change that setting. Or if you're already using Microsoft and you can deal with using Bing, I never thought I would use Bing, but it's actually really useful when it gives you the links sometimes. And that has a little green bit that pops up and says your data is protected. So just take a minute and think about it and do something about it, and you can really minimize that risk.
Because I question, you know, like the amount of the next generation of talent, for example. So they're more junior, they have no experience of working in business, of the importance of regulation, you know, the way data's handled or anything like that. So they're just going to be going for it. And it's probably going to be a very small mistake like that that causes a ton of disruption. Someone did mention on the chat actually that free ChatGPT, you can apparently turn off your data capture. Is that right? I don't know who, I can't remember who it was mentioned that, but I thought it was a point to make, because if we can, it's probably a good thing to do, right? Patricia?
Oh, they allowed that for free now. Yeah, it used to be just the higher level tier.
Awesome. Oh, okay. Thank you very much.
But you still have to actively do it rather than just open up the browser and run with it forever. Then that's training.
Some great links now coming into the chat.
Yeah. That's excellent, Sarah. Thanks ever so much. Really do appreciate that, and I'm looking forward to some questions, no doubt, that will come at the end of the next presentations. We're going to hand you over to Toro.
Okay, and I'm going to have a go at trying to share my screen.
Will it work?
Will it work? Let's see. Okay, so I'm hopeful you can see that.
Yes, we can. Well,
Fantastic. So let's crack on.
Always a good start.
Always a good start. Absolutely. Okay, so I'm just going to try to whiz through this. Might not go through everything, but let's see how it goes. Yeah, so just give some introduction. Obviously, we all know AI and all that. And I'm going to talk a bit about bias. So why it happens, why we should pay attention to it. I'm sure most of us already know that we should pay attention to it. And because I'm so cool like that, I'll give you some tips as to what you can do about it. And Sarah has already hinted about a few of the things which I'm going to talk about. So at least that will reinforce it, right? So without much ado, let's go in. So I'm at the wrong part of my presentation. Okay, so let's see. introduction. So key terms. The thing is, there's all this stuff about what is ML and AI. For the purposes of what we're doing here, just treat them one and the same. If I use the words interchangeably between machine learning and AI, just think of it as exactly the same thing. It makes no difference. So obviously, we all know what ML is. Things that are used in recommender engines, etc. And as Sarah said, um, generative AI is on the increase. If you've been alive in the last 2 years, we've heard nothing else but that. But I wanted to just kind of bring more of a global kind of perspective to it, because this, you can see this happening in organizations as well. A lot of countries out there are really thinking about, what's the plan for AI. We've been hearing all this stuff, so now we need to pay attention to it. So if we go back to years and years ago, there were only 3 countries in the world that had some kind of plan about AI. But as of 2022, we're now up to 62 who have kind of released some draft, some form of a strategy. There's more that are still working on theirs, but that's just going to show where where the world is paying attention to. There's some graphical representation of that. As you can see, lots of countries really starting to think about, what is the plan? What's the long-term goal? What are we doing? And most of those granted in what we call the global north, but nevertheless, huge increase. But out of that, we're seeing about half of the countries actually have some sort of regulation in place. So it's logical to see that the strategy kind of precedes the regulation. So which is a good thing, right? I think people are starting to think about, what do we do first? How do we think about what we want to achieve, and then start to think of how to regulate it? Because obviously you can't regulate something that you don't really understand or have a plan for. But regulation can't do everything, right? And this is why, for those of us who are in organizations or who are building AI, we need to kind of pay attention to how we want to build these AI tools. And the OECD has put out some great principles out there. And I mean, if you take nothing away from everything I say, I think this slide is quite good, because it talks about, things like human-centered values, fairness, safety, explainability, accountability, all those things that we really need to pay attention to with, the rise of AI. I know, I don't know about you guys, but we've all been in the room with that one individual who's like, oh, AI is going to erase us. AI is going to kill us. We don't like AI. I know I've been one of those at times, but I think these principles are very good to kind of guide us, the people who are going to be building and implementing these tools, to kind of think about what type of what types of what type of technology do we want to build and bring into the world. But one of the nice things as well in the recommendations, and this is very pertinent to industry as well, is if you look at the 4th thing on the right hand side, is really about trying to train and prepare the workforce for the change that is going to come with using AI, etc. So because the work that I do is specifically, looking at bias. So I just want to give some examples, because when we look at like those principles that we talked about, when we say things like fairness, etc., these are the kind of things that we're really trying to mitigate against. So just to give you some examples, some real life examples, just to bring it to life a little bit, because I know we talk about these things a lot, but what does it really mean? So here we are looking at an example where Amazon's hiring algorithm was only accepting male applicants, excuse me, for the role of engineers, just because it's been trained on information that showed that essentially most engineers, if not all the engineers, were can't get my words out, were male. So that's what the algorithm learned. We've seen examples. Researchers have seen that Google's search algorithm would show more executive job adverts um, to um, to men. And we also saw a few years ago where there was a thing with the UKA levels results where people from lower income areas had a less favorable outcome than others. We've seen cases in criminal uh, justice system, etc. And one of the ones that we hear so much about is around facial recognition, where people are not being recognized at maybe equal equal rates and etc. By extension, if that technology is being used in a car, then maybe the car doesn't see you, and there's a host of examples out there. Now, one thing I just want to point out when we talk about these examples is, say, in the case of the Amazon's hiring algorithm, one thing to emphasize is that it is not trying. What the problem is not just saying we need to hire equal numbers of X group and then Y group. It's the problem is when somebody who is qualified otherwise is being excluded, and that's really the issue. So it's not about getting X number through the door, but it's more about, if everything else was equal, you would be picked, but because the algorithm has learned something that it shouldn't have learned, it's disqualified that individual. So that's what we are looking at. So I'm just going to whiz through a few things. I won't go through what fairness is, but bias. So where does it come from? And there's nothing I'm going to say here that will be news to anybody. So first of all, and Sarah talked about this, we'll look at it again, garbage in, garbage out. If the data you're using is not representative of what you're trying to do, it won't yield a good outcome. So I think as business leaders, we need to really pay attention to our data quality and stuff like that. But also, this is also the same thing in the Amazon's example, whereby the data is accurate, is representative of the world, but it's just understanding that sometimes that outcome might, is that the outcome you want to replicate, and just paying attention to that. The algorithms we use, so for those who are more kind of hands-on, the algorithms we use will also influence it. We've seen that in research as well, and also data manipulation. So anything you do, upsampling, downsampling, again, for the hands-on people. But this is just to kind of bring that attention that it's not just the data itself that is the issue. There's other things that could introduce these issues. Having said that, the largest issue is the incoming data. So why should you care? I mean, it's it's responsibility, and that's what we call leaders of organizations to be. What happens if Netflix gets your movie recommendation wrong, and you might end up watching something you didn't want to watch, or you might miss out on stuff. You turn up to work and everyone is like, oh, Traitors, did you watch Traitors? And you're the only one who hasn't. So in the grand scheme of things, it's a trivial thing. But what if a bank gets your loan outcome wrong? Now, that could be something that is a bit more impactful. So again, we're asking people to kind of pay attention to your industry. Just because there's stuff happening out there doesn't mean we have to replicate that in our own organizations. The other thing is reputation, right? So on the one hand, we're saying we should be responsible, but there's also reputational impact that comes into this. So I'll just put this up here. Hopefully you can all read this. This is David Heinemeier Hansen. He's, very well known in the tech world. He and his wife have applied for an Apple card. I think they both get the card approved, but he gets 20 times more allowance than she does, and he just goes berserk. So the point is, if you get it wrong, your reputation is on the line, because people will drag you on the internet. You will be called out, and you'll be called things that, you're not that thing, but that's the way the world is. So yeah, he goes on a very long rant about this. So these are just some excerpts just to show people. But yeah, what should we do about it? So as Sarah did say earlier, hire ethically minded data analysts, data scientists, etc. And to pay attention to some of the things that we've talked about. You want people who have that awareness, etc. But also you guys, the leaders, the senior uh, um, uh, leaders in the organization have a big role to play as well. A lot of times we see that when we talk about ethics and stuff like that, it's the practitioners who talk about it. The leaders are absent. So very important for leaders to, toe that line as well. Diversify your teams. You heard this earlier. Um, if not for anything, just to give it that different perspective. So this is going back years and years ago, 10 years ago, when Apple is like, oh, we've got this whole new health app, and, they've missed out something that, half of the world would be potentially interested in. And why is that? I mean, I'm making an assumption here, but it's just having that diversity just helps you to kind of pick things that a homogeneous group of individuals might not really see. For the hands-on people in the room, which probably not many, the idea is that when the data sets you use are very important. Sometimes these what we call protected characteristics might not be obvious, right? But they could be hidden. So this is a map of Chicago, and the colors represent different ethnic groups. And what you can see there is that the postcode is a proxy for ethnicity. So yeah, that's just an example of where the protected characteristics might not be easily available, but it is hidden in there. So again, stuff to pay attention to. A bit of an interesting one. Do you need to build an AI tool? So I think we're going to see over the next few years, or and we've seen that already, where there's a lot of people building AI tools just because it's the rave. We want to get in there. I think there's a call to pragmatism, where we need to check that actually, is that what we really need? Because it might not be what you need. Having said that, if you build one, check that it works for everybody, because I think where we've ended up as is, if it's good enough, if it works for most, then it's fine. We'll just launch it and that's okay. But it's then disproportionately impacts a small group of people. Now, I'm not saying you have to build an AI tool that has to work for everybody, but you have to have the knowledge of the limitations of your AI tools, so that you can make a plan B for the people that it will negatively impact, and you can give them an alternate solution. So I think it's very important to understand the limitation of your tools. As I said before, take data quality seriously. Garbage in, garbage out, long-term monitoring culture. So it's important for us, before people start implementing AI, to think about how will we check that it's paying off, it's giving us that return on investment. How do we know that we will be measuring it and checking that it was the right thing for us? And I just want to give you a bit of a sidebar about long-term monitoring culture. This is me trying to run last year. I absolutely hate running, but I needed to run because I needed to quickly build up my cardiovascular endurance for an event I was going to be doing. So I thought, okay, how do I measure to check my cardio is improving? So I said, okay, I'm going to measure my resting heart rate. Great. So I started measuring my resting heart rate. And a few weeks down the line, I have this graph and I'm like, hey, check me out. My resting heart rate is going down. So I'm getting fitter. It's lovely. Great. I was happy. But I kept measuring it, but not really paying attention to it. And a few months down the line, the graph extends. So back then, what you were looking at was way over here. And the graph extends, and I look at that graph, and actually, what I was seeing was not an improvement. The biggest influence on my resting heart rate is actually hormones. And I thought, right. And this is a classic example of measuring something for a long time to actually understand the impact. And we will need to do this with every AI you implement. It's just about making sure that you're measuring stuff. If not, people might not get the impact, the financial impact that they want. I think this is one of the last in this bit. It's start your AI journey with processes that aren't directly linked to a customer. We've seen so many examples of a customer having to interact with an AI tool that's just gone rogue. So there's so many what we call back office applications where it's not a customer it's not a customer engaging what's called process. Start with those, because if it goes wrong, only you know about it and you can fix it. So I will stop there just because I'm conscious I've been banging on a bit. So I will try to stop the screen share. I hope I don't accidentally leave the meeting. Okay, no, I'm still here.
Still there. Oh, well, thank you so much, Sarah and Itara. Some really interesting things to take away. I think, just thinking around kind of, I suppose, individuals, businesses, AI policies, making sure you've got them into place and the right kind of governance around them is, hugely important. I think we all know that, AI is here to stay. So, it's just having those diverse teams and building up those teams, and as we say, just the importance of the governance before, I suppose, really being sure as a business you're ready to take on that AI journey. But just conscious of time, so just really wanted to open it up to the floor, really, to see if anyone had any questions. Sarah and Itaro. Just trying to. Oh no, that's me. I've raised my own hand. There you go.
There's certainly been lots of chat going on throughout all. There's lots of people who've got very different levels of experience. But I think, Ian, you had a topic that you were interested to raise.
I'm just turning myself on. In the team sense of the word, obviously. So yeah, I mean, I think the really interesting one, this evolution of the data that the AI tools are using, ChatGPT 3 to 4, to almost exponentially increase, and the head of OpenAI talking about next iterations being exponentially larger still. But there is also a point at which the gains seem to trail off, and actually there's been a lot of chat about the more people use these tools, the more they adapt, the almost the blander the responses become. They might become better quality, but just not very good in terms of providing useful insights. It would be an interesting one to, I think, to explore. Do we run the risk of kind of making everything beige by the overuse of AI?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I wasn't sure if it was aimed at us.
Either.
Yeah. Yeah, so there is that risk. Yeah, there is that thing of, I've heard people say, oh, you don't get as good as outcomes as you used to. But one thing I do know there is, which I've just put the link to a post which I put on LinkedIn a while ago, is there was this research done, and it actually talked about the impact it has on us, those people that use the tool. And it's like there is a limit, there is where it kind of increases it helps you, but after a while it kind of hinders and impacts your own natural abilities. And it's kind of understanding, where when do I need it, and when is it an issue for me per se. And the other thing was the consultant in the experiment, again understanding, and Sarah talked a bit about this, understanding when the tool is giving you a good outcome to when the tool gives you a bad outcome that you think is a good outcome. So there's all those complications, which I don't think we really understand where that line is between, yay, it's all good, on, oh, actually, you might fall off a cliff just yet. But yeah, might not have answered what you asked, but yeah, I think there's a lot to pay attention to.
But I think we're finding the more you can sort of really focus it, like, even just simple prompt engineering, right? If you ask it 3-4 questions in one go, it gives you a much more rubbish response, and it doesn't necessarily answer all the questions. The more specific you can be, the more tailored you can be, the better. And then along that spectrum, the sort of more complex you want to get with it, you can make custom GPTs, which again, the more specific you make that task, the better. For example, if you're using it for recruitment, use it for job descriptions, and don't try to make a solve the world recruitment bot. Make a I write really good job descriptions bot. That's a real use case that we found. And then further than that, if you're using something like a model, the more fine-tuned that is on your type of data. If you're looking at medical applications, if it's trained on medical data, you're going to get a better response. But this is true in humans as well, and I'm guilty of this. I'm a generalist, and I love being a generalist, but that means I know a little bit about everything. And if you want really specific responses in like the world's expert in a specific programming language, then you need to go to that expert in that programming language.
Thanks, Sarah. Thanks, Itaro. I think Eric's made a couple of good points, actually. Don't know if is Eric there? Let's see. So he's
Hello, I'm here.
hi.
Yes. Hi, how are you? Great
Very
talk.
well,
It's
thanks.
really good
How
to
are
hear.
you?
I'm doing well, thank you. Sorry I'm off camera, but it's nice to meet everybody today, and thanks for sending this invite.
It's okay. Whereabouts are you from?
I'm actually in London right now, but I'm American. So like Sarah, my wife is from Chicago, but I'm actually grew up in New York City and raised my family in Washington D.C. But now I'm based in London, based in the UK, and living out in Kent. So yeah, but great to connect with this group.
Cool. We're just having a look at obviously the points that you put on the chat. You've come up with a couple of important things really. So I don't know if you wanted to enhance on that or.
Thanks, James. Of course, thank you for opening it up. I think for me, when I'm sitting down with customers and talking to different groups that are taking on AI and trying to figure out how to incorporate AI in their strategies, I really boil it down to 3 things. One, it's really about aligning the customer need and the customer pain point to the right use case. I mean, there's so many stories right now where C-suites are coming into development teams and product teams saying, we've got to integrate an LLM into our product, full stop, right? And what does that mean, right? And so that's fraught with all kinds of perils and in terms of the scale, the costs, and all the problems around understanding data and your enterprise data, exposing data. It creates so many questions, and so it's really about trying to identify first and foremost where's the biggest pain point that AI can help, and what are those use cases that it can really be useful for now. And I think we'll see, as the points that were raised earlier, we'll see those use cases evolve over time and become more sophisticated. But today there are a lot of productivity things, like helping writing and helping providing reviews and providing strategy feedback are some things that individuals can use. So just as examples. Number two is really, and this is the point that Ettore is really kind of hitting really well, is that it's really important that you clean and understand your data. You can't just throw your dirty data right at the AI and have it magically figure it out for you. It's just not going to be that effective. It certainly can be useful to provide some categorization or even some classification or some organization around your data, but you still have to understand it has to have good governance around your data. And that's super important as you think about taking this on. And then three, this is kind of the big one too, is that a lot of organizations now really need to upskill their teams. They need to upskill and this, there's this is a point that people are bringing about losing jobs, and there's a fear about jobs going away. It's like, no, there's a real opportunity to upskill your teams and learn what these different models can do, and learn what data science can do, and learn what refining can do, and learn the skills of prompt engineering. These are all pieces that come together. And I even think that, as prompt engineering plays a key role in building these AI applications, there's a role for other expertise to come into that product team, like English majors or philosophy majors, people that are good at using, or psychologists, right? They're good at using words to influence and describe behaviors that they want, can come into to build an application. So those are three main points. There's a lot of detail under each of those, but those are things I like to share with customers as we get into AI.
Yeah, some really good points there, and especially I think when we talk about kind of upskilling your team to support the technologies, because even us working in the recruitment staffing space, that's the one thing that we always talk about first off, is just making sure and looking internally really in terms of the team and the technical acumen you have on board before kind of going externally. So it's hugely important. What about kind of in terms of just building? I know we've talked about kind of diverse teams, and getting kind of different thinkers on board. Sarah, Tara, what would you say in terms of where you would start to build these diverse teams?
So I've just built a team, and it's quite an interesting one. I've got a really interesting mix of people. You actually know Karen Jean-Francois, because I looked at your post and I realized she liked it. She works for me now. So yeah, the thing I said to the recruiter, actually, because AI is so new, because AI is to the business world, it's not new. It's been around since the 1950s in that sense, but because it's affecting everything, I specifically said, look for CVs that have a really squiggly career and have someone who's made some serious pivots and serious changes, because this is a serious change, and I want someone who can run with that. Yeah. And I've found some really interested candidates that way, and that also means that I'm getting a much more diverse selection than has trained up through some tech pipeline that has had a chance to get knocked out at every bit of a stage because they didn't have the right degree. I've got PhDs, I've got no degrees, I've got everybody, and they're all fantastic. So I think just think about what you're really looking for, and it's probably something different than what you might have looked for tech roles in the past.
Yeah, and it's a learning curve, right? Because it's still a fairly new space, if you like, just building up, AI teams. So I think we'll see kind of a huge, I think, uptake this year, definitely. So
Jane, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Oh, I've been messing around my microphone. I pulled it out by accident
Seen you
instead of a charger.
Yeah,
and then I thought, that's it, I'm not going to be able to speak again. Just actually on Eric's point, and I know there's a couple of bits in here about upskilling teams.
Yeah.
Big Data London, when we talked, and I presented there about upskilling for future fit teams. And it was really interesting because apparently we still have a statistic that says that 75% of training budgets are targeted at tech skills. hard skills and 25% are for softer skills, right? But that's been the same for apparently like the last 50, 100 years, and yet I think with AI coming, that's the bit that's got to change to get this bit right. So it's all around looking after the situation, as instead of, because we've got more capability now to be able to create code and do a lot of the tech stuff, but what we really need now is people looking after it. So much more of a nurturing type. I mean, we're just launching and this isn't a sales thing, guys, but we just launched a product around, because we do education and training, which is a gamification product, if you like, or scenario based game product to help leadership teams and more experienced people and those coming into industry about how they communicate and how they collaborate and become aware of the situations. And I think there's going to be a lot more of that requirement moving forward. So I think this actual point about upskilling your teams as quickly as possible in order for them to deal with new AI products or whatever is actually fundamental. And of course, understanding the impact of it, from a sustainable perspective as well. And I'm Lisa hasn't mentioned anything yet, which I'm quite surprised about because of the use of AI at the moment. But how much, for example, but how much energy we're using to do all of this sort of stuff. So from an ethical perspective, we've got to have a lens on that. So I think there's an awful lot of work. What worries me is Eric's other point is that companies still haven't got the place yet where their data's in good state. Some are only just starting to go on the data transformation journey, and they're already looking at AI. So it's a bit of I'm not being pessimistic. I think we'll get through it, but it's going to make the change a longer change, because we're adding more complex components to what is already quite a big ball of wool to untie, in my opinion. I don't know if people agree with that, but that's kind of what I'm seeing.
Jez, I'm going to take that as an invite to.
It wasn't an invite.
No, I'm in now.
But Sarah and Ettore might have a good, good opinion on this point.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think there is that what's called pressure, where people feel we've got to kind of get in there and build some AI tool. And I think it was Eric who said, you've got CM suite exec saying we need this thing, and it might not be what people need right now, because the fundamentals have to be in place. And if those fundamentals aren't in place, you're just building yourself up for lots of issues further down the line. So I don't know if my internet is still. Am I still there?
Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah, you're good. You're good.
So more than ever, I think now is a time that people need to hold their nerve and go, okay, I need to slow down so we can build up later down the line. And to your point about changing skills sets, absolutely. The more technical things are being abstracted every day, it's now easier for the lay person to kind of have access and use these tools, and that you're going to see that more and more. So those hard tech skills, whilst they'll still be useful, they will still exist. We just need to start to think about a different type of skill set will be needed, because not everybody will need that core technical skill. So
And Lisa, because I know you was going to come in there, and I wasn't saying not an introduction to not say anything. Thank you, Ettore, by the way. But yeah, far away. I mean, you must have a question for Sarah and Ettore about the usage of AI and its impact.
I think it's echoing what a lot of people are saying, is that I think we've got to really start to define the problem that we're solving and not just be rushing at everything because AI is that new shiny tool, because there are consequences. And I think we are moving into a more complex society. That I'm a big fan of trying to rebrand AI to be regenerative AI, rather than just doing the same thing that we already know how to do. Point it at the complex problems, because it does come with a huge carbon footprint. It does come with a huge amount of water that's needed to cool it, biodiversity impact, the bias, the there's so much stuff that you could go down the negative, oh my God, we've all seen the Terminator, let's not allow Skynet out of the bag route. But we need to be leveraging it to go, AI gives us the power to go beyond the ability for one person to process the complexity that we're leaning in. But if we live in a 3-year, 5-year strategy world, we're not really using new tools to their best advantage. And I loved Sarah's comment about let's look for squiggly careers that know how to adapt to change, because I think that's the biggest thing, is the change is accelerated beyond industrial revolution levels, and we now need to be a bit more flexible, accept the word pivot as a good thing. Adaptable.
Yeah.
I think we've got a nice little product that comes with 6 C's of changing and, you know, we have to get into that mindset. My little moment is the sense of business as usual. We need to just scrap it and go, what's the new normal? And how can we leverage our skills to get there? Adapt or die.
Sounds like concept zero all over, Lisa. That does.
We could spend a whole another webinar, I think, on that. But
and I think we should.
I think we should, definitely. Just conscious of time. So now Yasmin's had her hand up for a while.
Yeah, hi everyone.
Hi
I'm
there.
Yasmin. I work at National Highways. Because I work in the public sector and in the transport industry, AI applications here are generally considered high risk, like for example, as defined in the forthcoming EU AI Act. We're quite early in our AI governance journey, and I think we're quite nervous because we don't want to rush creating a governance framework because it's important to get it right. But equally, we want to address AI use that's in flight. So I think my question is around how to manage the risk and create, you know, a culture of responsible AI and governance without being perceived as the department of no when you're like early on in your journey.
A very good point. Sarah, Itoro, do you have any? Actually, Yasmin, I think we built your chatbot, didn't we? One of our nurture students built your chatbot.
Oh, Badins.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. I worked on the MVP with him. Yeah, that was cool. It's actually been deployed now, so quite exciting.
That was awesome. That was a great case study. That from you know, getting someone next gen talent. Yeah, Itoro or Sarah, did you have any comments on Yasmin's?
Yeah, okay. So yeah, it's always a tricky one. You know, we see this where you kind of have this trade-off, or like a perceived trade-off between innovation and regulation. And people think, well, if we can't do anything if you don't let us. And at the same time, we're trying to say, let's just think about it, let's be, you know. And I think a lot of places are in the same place. You know, when I look at a lot of the what's it called, global south countries, they are really reluctant to regulate anything. So like, hang on a minute, we don't know, you know, what we don't know. And I think if you're in a place like that, it's just about education and having those conversations, documentation, just giving people that awareness, you know, those things about, think about what you're doing, and is it something, you know, as Sarah said, if it landed on the front page of what's called Daily Mail, how would you feel about that? You know, would you raise your hand and say, yep, that was me, or would you be going, oh, maybe not? So I think in the initial days, you know, there's a lot of conversation about awareness and education, documenting what people are doing, trying to learn from it, you know. And I think that will build you enough of a, you know, knowledge what's called bank for when people want to start regulating things, because you'll have a good idea of this is what worked and this is what didn't work, etc. But yes, it's a tough place to be, I know.
Yeah, what can you say yes to, right? What use cases would actually be okay, right? If you
You're
would
a
say,
mute, Sarah.
I
no, I can
we can hear her. We can hear you.
Okay.
Is it me? Oh,
you know,
sorry. Is it me?
We can hear
Ticketing's sort
Sarah.
of gone a bit. Yeah, just think about what you can say yes to. Can you use it for organizing the office activities? Can you use it for explaining to your coworker, Sarah, why she should probably put on headphones when talking in a shared workspace? Can you use it for give me some bullet points on this, right? If you think about the cases where you can allow it and you can explicitly spell that out, then you can do more to say, okay, and maybe in these cases, yeah, maybe not.
So that's really interesting, and thanks so much for that. I think Tara, I think probably is your internet, so which
The
may have
gremlins
disappeared,
are out, yeah.
actually. It's gone. Oh well, I'm just conscious of time, so I know I'm sure you've all got busy afternoons to get back to. So yeah, some really interesting points there, and definitely I think we'll definitely have to follow up with another discussion, another webinar in Q2. And just want to say thanks so much, Sarah and Itaro, for presenting. Got some really interesting takeaways from this as well, and thanks to everyone else for attending. So it's really great to have you all on board. So we've videoed it, so yeah, so for anyone that wants a copy, obviously reach out. I'm sure we can send you the link, but yeah, thanks so much for coming, everyone.
Lovely to see you all.
Thank you very much for joining all.
Thank
Have
you.
a great afternoon. Hope to see you again soon.
Cheers.
Bye. Thanks for the great
you.
discussion.
Bye.
Always so much to talk
Bye.
about. Bye.
Yes.
Bye-bye.
Ta-da.